This video is brought to you by FaceApp. If there's one thing we can all agree on in this dark world, it's that Mission Impossible movies are a pretty good time. If you don't mildly appreciate at least one of these movies, you're lying to yourself. Because of this franchise's commitment to entertainment and its impressive stamina to remain consistently entertaining for over 20 years, Mission Impossible means both nothing and everything to me. These aren't deep films, but anytime a Mission Impossible movie drops, it's important, it stands out, it's representative of what blockbuster filmmaking could and should be. Even when they come out a little underwhelming, I'm always grateful for these movies, which is why ranking them is so goddamn fun. So let's not waste any more time. This is my ranking of every Mission Impossible movie from worst to best, starting with an absolute shocker. It's pretty much universally agreed upon that Mission Impossible 2 is the worst one. Directed by John Woo, Mission Impossible 2 follows Ethan Hunt as he must chase down a former IMF agent to prevent him from unleashing a biological weapon called Chimera. The film dropped a full 4 years after the first Mission Impossible and obviously performed very well. It also features music from Limp Bizkit, which I needed to bring up because of course I did. The thing about this is, though I can't put it any higher than last, I feel a need to defend 2 just slightly. If you detach all Mission Impossible isms from this and look at it as a standalone action film starring Tom Cruise, directed by John Woo, it's pretty solid. I mean, the action sequences alone, especially the grand finale, are nothing short of thrilling. John Woo is not to blame here, in my opinion. It's definitely not the best directed film here, but I do think he has more control with chaos and energy than, say, J.J. Abrams in Mission Impossible 3, or certainly McQuarrie in the first half of Final Reckoning. It's a good, stupid, fun time. As hilariously unrealistic as that opening climbing sequence is, it's just so fun to watch. But that's the thing, right? On the outside, you might think that's all you need for a Mission Impossible movie to succeed, but if I've learned anything through watching all of these films, it's that these movies aren't just about action and thrills, as much as you might think that's what it's all about. This is proven in pretty much every single movie after this, when you realize it's the human connection at the heart of these films, the sophistication of the stunts, and the absurdly high consequences that make them endlessly rewatchable. Here, the action, as high energy as it is, feels just a bit hollow. It's cool as fuck, but I wouldn't call it anything to write home about. Hunt here is particularly uninteresting, even if, again, he looks pretty sick. He feels robotic and one-noted, which is an aspect of his character that other films try to challenge and play with, whereas here Woo seems pretty uninterested in that. I guess it's just proof that the plot in these films does matter, because this is an example of what happens when it lacks substance. You get something frustratingly forgettable and weirdly boring at times. One thing I will say is this has one of my favorite mask moments in the franchise. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if you could change your face? I mean, you can, thanks to this week's sponsor, FaceApp. FaceApp is an app that helps you feel more confident in photos using simple editing tricks. As a person on the internet, there are a handful of days where I need my face to be online and I don't like how it looks that day. This isn't even unique to what I do. I'm sure many people run into this same issue all of the time. But I've been using FaceApp Pro for honestly a few years now before they even reached out, and it's been one of the most useful apps on my device. What I love about FaceApp specifically is how well it works for subtle edits. What I mean by that is, like, if I have some acne or any skin issues, if my skin just doesn't even look that great in the light, FaceApp takes care of it immediately. The edits actually happen live, and sometimes they're so subtle that I'm like, wait, what even happened? Which, I don't know about you, but that's how touch-up editing should be in photos, right? Here's the before and after for reference. It doesn't even look edited at all, which is just how I like it. On top of that, you can do all your other photo editing in the app. I'm talking adjusting the highlights, the shadows, using different color filters, and more. And as someone who does photo editing on a weekly basis and is weirdly particular about what I need from these apps, FaceApp delivers in every way. I've used it for a handful of my thumbnails, even the goofier ones. No, that is not actually an old man. That's me. I feel like for years I've been searching for a reliable photo editing app that I can use on the go, that works really well for selfies, and FaceApp is the one. Click the link in my description or scan the QR code to download FaceApp and try the Pro version for 1 week free. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Is this crazy? Are we crazy for this? The Final Reckoning, the apparently final Mission Impossible film, just so happens to be the second worst. Acting as the second part to Dead Reckoning, here we follow Hunt and his team as they attempt to track down and stop a piece of AI that has the potential to destroy the world. A simple premise, but you'd be surprised how convoluted it gets. Clocking in at 2 hours and 49 minutes, it's the longest Mission Impossible movie, and yeah, it feels like a workout. I needed a nap after this movie. I'm already being more negative about this than 2, if you can't tell, but don't get it twisted. This still has way more purpose than 2, which manages to keep it a step above. But if you can't tell, I also think this is the most unlikable Mission Impossible film of the bunch. These films have always had a sense of self-seriousness about them. To be honest, it's something I love about these movies when done right, but when you get it wrong and you treat every single scene like it's a life or death situation, it starts to become a bit of an eye roller. It's a weirdly edited movie, to be honest. Exposition and talky scenes are shot and cut at 1,000,000 miles per hour, while one of the main stunts of the film, the underwater sequence, goes full silent mode at a certain point, and the slow burn approach actually makes it way more nail-biting than anything else. I'm all for backwards choices like that, but this thing is downright clunky with its pacing. It's the kind of movie that realized somewhere along the way that there's way too much going on plot-wise, way too many things to tie up, way too many characters who need to know this at that time and need to go there to get that before this, and they try to make this as exciting as it can, but it just comes out sounding even more convoluted in the process. At a certain point, I'm just kind of nodding along more than I'm feeling thrilled by anything. It is a case of, if everything is dealt out with the same level of intensity, nothing feels intense after a while. All of that said, it's not last for a reason. That underwater sequence, as well as the final fight sequence, are two of the best stunts the franchise has ever pulled off. Not only are they technically impressive, but they feel like they push Hunt, and by Hunt I mean Cruise, to his limits. It's a real there'll never be another Tom Cruise moment, and if this is meant to be the final Mission Impossible film, I think getting me to feel that was crucial. It's a nice send-off. Damn, this guy fucking hates the Dead Reckoning films, apparently. I'd argue, starting here, none of these films are outright bad. They range from good and fine to me levitating out of my body in the theater. Dead Reckoning is good and fine. Here we follow Hunt and his team, once again, as they chase down the same piece of AI, the entity. It's funny, both these films combined make up almost 6 hours of runtime, and it's again a weirdly straightforward plot, at least next to the rest of these films. Dead Reckoning is very interesting to me. This film had a lot of pressure, if you didn't know. Not only was it the follow-up to Fallout, which we'll get to in a second, one of the most highly acclaimed films here, but it was also Tom Cruise's first film after Top Gun Maverick, a film that got a lot of people to fall back in love with Tom Cruise as a sort of savior of cinema figure. He was on a bit of a hot streak, so obviously a lot of people, myself included, were ready for whatever this would be. And it ended up being kind of a Looney Tunes movie. The stunts here feel weirdly cartoonish in the best way. It's the kind of stunts a cartoon stuntman would come up with. Train going off the rails, motorcycle off a cliff, tiny car down the steps. It's kind of a goofy movie when you zoom out a bit, and for how serious and life-threatening these films usually feel, I kind of appreciate what this represents next to the rest of this franchise for that reason. That said, I think this is the ugliest looking Mission Impossible film by far. Man, and I was hoping I'd change my mind, but just scrubbing through footage for this video, I was really shocked at how much flatter it was than I remember it being. For some reason, the images in this film just lack depth. The locations don't feel tangible, even though I know Tom Cruise was doing all this. The use of Dutch angles gets real old real fast. I mean, I'm sure it's some people's thing, but looking at the cinematography alone, this just really isn't my cup of tea personally. Funny enough, this is actually, at the time of recording this, the only Mission Impossible film to ever be nominated for an Oscar, getting a Best VFX and Sound nomination in 2024, but losing to Godzilla Minus One and The Zone of Interest. While I'm not crazy about the cinematography, I do have to admit that the VFX in the train sequence alone are pretty crazy, though I'd still probably vote for Godzilla if it was up to me. Back to the movie though, ultimately this suffers from a lot of the same issues as Final Reckoning. It's just a bit tamer and a little less clunky than that one. I'm also realizing that as good as Morales is as Gabriel in both this and Final Reckoning, he doesn't have the same bite as some of the franchise's best villains, certainly less threatening than Sean Harris's Solomon Lane. Where I feel this succeeds is in being a more interesting film about AI and tech than Final Reckoning. Here it feels like Cruise or Hunt is up against this threat more often, and it's not too subtle about it mirroring Cruise's own presence in the industry, the looming threat of AI and whatnot on actors and filmmakers. Not unlike Maverick also feeling like a meta-commentary on his place in a quickly changing industry. This, combined with the blatant absurdity of its stunts, made this pretty hard to dislike. I don't think I'll ever rewatch this movie for the reasons I said, but like I said, it's a good and fine time. I would consider this to be a pretty safe list so far, but Mission Impossible 3 being this high might be a bit questionable to some of you. But there's a lot to love about Mission Impossible 3, more than it gets credit for. Mission Impossible 3 follows Ethan Hunt, now retired, as he comes into conflict with a dangerous arms dealer played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, who threatens not only Hunt's existence, but the love of his life. Where do we even begin with this one? Off the bat, Mission Impossible 3 single-handedly took this franchise out of the mud, and in my eyes turned it into the type of movie we know them as today. No, it's not full McQuarrie quite yet, but it does plant a few seeds like Hunt's personal life conflicting with his work life, and the approach to performing stunts from a more strategic angle rather than going full action. To put it plainly, it's the first Mission Impossible film to treat Hunt as a real character. Some other notable things to bring up: it's the first film with Simon Pegg as Benji, so it also feels like Hunt is finally building up some sort of team. Aaron Paul is in this briefly, so there's that. And as many of you know, it's directed by J.J. Abrams. From what I understand, the main thing people take issue with in this film is J.J. Abrams' frenetic style of shooting. This is a 2006 film, after all. This was before shaky cam in action films got truly burnt out of existence. You were still allowed to go crazy town with the camera as much as you wanted, and to be honest, yeah, it's pretty fucking annoying. There's a reason this style of action filmmaking went out of style relatively quickly. You can't tell what the hell is going on most of the time, and that's a problem. But I will say, sometimes it works. The stuff during the windmill sequence kinda worked. I liked how a scene that doesn't go successfully kind of feels like a blur to everyone involved. On another note, I think sometimes people hate on Abrams just for the hell of it, but I think he has some real highlights here and there. Literally, the light in this film looks pretty good in my opinion. I like how deep the contrast is most of the time. I like the lens flares. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I think this looks leagues better than Dead Reckoning, to be honest. It's funny, if something came out looking like this today, people would be gobbling it up. They'd be saying stuff like, why has this movie got all this sauce? But because it's J.J. Abrams, we gotta shit on it, I guess. Don't get me wrong, the shooting style gets annoying after a while, but if you can look past that, a lot of this movie looks kinda good. On a less controversial note, Philip Seymour Hoffman is incredible here. I'm tempted to say he's neck and neck with Solomon Lane for best Mission Impossible villain of the franchise. As is the case with every Philip Seymour Hoffman film I've seen, he treats this performance with the utmost importance. It feels no less significant than any of his all-timers, which is crazy. It's for these reasons that I legitimately can't put this any lower. No, it's not the most polished Mission Impossible film we have here. Yes, it's a little annoying here and there, but when looking at these in chronological order, it's the first one that really gets you to feel for Hunt. There's a sense of heart at the center of this. For what this represents in the timeline of these films, and for just how cool most of it is, I struggle not to really enjoy this. The one that started it all. And thank God it's good. I feel like it isn't brought up enough that the first Mission Impossible was directed by none other than Brian De Palma and written by Robert Towne, who also did the second one, by the way, and is partially to blame for the second one, in my opinion, as well as David frickin' Koepp. This feels like a good place to bring up the origins of this franchise. If you didn't know, this is based on the Mission Impossible TV series from the 60s. It's something Cruise had been wanting to turn into a film for years, but wasn't able to until he finally formed his own production company with Paula Wagner, where the film served as the first film to come out of the company. In that way, given how involved Cruise was in this, it feels a bit symbolic for how Cruise wants to be seen in the industry, the kinds of hands-on and determined type of entertainer he sees himself as. The kinds of films he starred in post Mission Impossible, with a few exceptions, were much more action-based than the more dramatic roles he would dabble in before this. All that to say, this franchise took off almost immediately for a reason. Beyond the iconic wire scene that I'll bring up in a second, this film as a whole has a sharp and thrilling approach to the spy genre that would pave the way for the genre moving forward. There are aspects to this franchise that don't really come alive for a few years, and I'll touch on that in a moment, but it does come out the gate swinging with its action. It says a lot that the film's central stunts are still considered some of the best stunts in the entire thing. Again, that wire sequence still remains one of the greatest things to come out of the franchise. It's one of the greatest sequences in cinematic history. It makes my palms go sweaty still, and it's one of those textbook examples of how to shot list a great high tension sequence. It starts before we even end up in the room too. Just the moment where Luther is like, "And you really think we're gonna do this?" And Hunt goes, "We're gonna do it." And then the theme drops, and then they cut to that zoom in on Luther in the car window. That alone is 10 seconds of cinematic perfection, in my opinion, and that's before we're even in the thick of it. In a few ways, this one really stands out next to the rest of the franchise. For one, the De Palma touch is very much present here, even if it's definitely one of the weaker examples. of his filmography. The film uses color and light a lot more intentionally than a lot of the other Mission Impossible films. There's more attention to stealth and subtlety here. It's relatively quaint compared to the rest. And Hunt as a character feels incredibly nerdy. I don't know if it's the haircut or what. He feels like a young, bushy-tailed version of the guy we see moving forward, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I like nerdy Hunt, but the jump from this to the cool, sweaty, long-haired guy we get in 2 is pretty crazy. There are sprinklings here and there that hint at some of Hunt's core characteristics that the franchise would play with later on, like his deeply protective traits, his love for community and friendship. That said, it's not a side of his character I would really pay attention to in this film or get much out of here without having seen the other films. Looking at this as its own thing, it's not like the deepest thing in the world. Feels like a good time to bring up the shortcomings. It feels blasphemous to say this about the OG, but you have to admit there's certainly some room for improvement here. Again, the character development is pretty loosey-goosey. It's a movie that sets out to make an entertaining blockbuster spy flick. They weren't all that focused on Hunt as a character quite yet, as much as they were concerned with showing off what Tom Cruise can do in a movie like this. It's a lot cleaner than 2, obviously, but it shares the same hollowness, where my engagement is based on what's happening right in front of me at that exact time. I barely care about these people outside of these action sequences, which is fine. This is what this movie is. It just makes a solid chunk of this feel just a little forgettable. I'm about to admit something a bit crazy, but Rogue Nation was the first Mission Impossible film I saw in theaters. It was just me and my mom, and we had a damn good time. She really loves these movies, and getting to have this experience with her for the first time felt weirdly special. But I promise, my appreciation for this movie goes beyond just the experience. I think it's quietly one of the best movies to come out of the franchise. Clearly, Rogue Nation is the first Christopher McQuarrie mission film, a pretty significant milestone here, as he would go on to direct, well, every single Mission Impossible film moving forward. He's kind of the Mission Impossible guy now. Not only that, but the McQuarrie films, unlike the first 4, seem to all exist under one storyline, at least more so than the others. Solomon is introduced here and bleeds into the next. Ilsa, played by Rebecca Ferguson, is introduced and goes on to become a pretty significant character in all films moving forward. Up until now, it feels like the franchise was just trying to figure out what it was, a clear, defining style, story, and cast that would carry it over the course of multiple movies, giving it a more epic feel. Rogue Nation is the film that accomplished that. It has meat on its bones. I'm very tempted to call this the best looking mission film. I absolutely adore how this looks. It finds itself in a very specific time, in what is, in my opinion, one of the best looking eras for film, when Hollywood didn't cut too many corners quite yet, but technology was advanced enough that anything was possible. And it was the last mission film to be shot entirely on film. God, do I miss that. I mean, dog, the image of Hunt jumping into the water is an all-timer, especially seeing it in IMAX. Woof. It is just one of those ridiculously specific and eye-catching Mission Impossible moments that I love. All the car chases in Morocco are vibrant and well-framed. Don't even get me started on the Opera House sequence. The use of shadows is crazy. They put the camera in places I didn't think you were able to put it. Rebecca Ferguson, I want to marry her. I mean, that sequence as a whole is just masterfully directed. There's close to no dialogue. The edit is sharp and witty. The stunts feel dangerous and thrilling. I mean, again, you can say the same about the underwater sequence here. That was a very memorable experience when I first saw it, and it stayed with me ever since. I mean, like, it's a damn near flawless flick. What do you want from me? It's a tough one. Nothing doesn't work here. It feels like a fantastic setup to what McQuarrie wanted to do moving forward, but nothing necessarily feels like the explosive exclamation point that I've come to expect from these movies, which is fine. That's not a problem. The next 2 are just better for having that. I love Ghost Protocol so much, man. This is my baby. This film, directed by Brad Bird, yes, that Brad Bird, tells the story of Ethan Hunt and the rest of the IMF team, who are recently disavowed by the US government after being blamed for a terrorist attack and must go about their next mission while off the grid. Ghost Protocol is such a unique film in the context of the series. It's in between the McQuarrie films, which feels unique in their own way, but it's not like it functions as independently as the 3 that came before it. I guess what I'm trying to say is this, without relying on what came before before or after it understands exactly what a Mission Impossible should be. It's kind of crazy to me that Bird didn't return for more. I think he really understands this character and has a lot more fun with the material than anyone else here. I think what works the most here is the humor. It really gets to me. I've never really considered the Mission Impossible films to be known for their humor, as good as Peg is at comic relief. But this one makes me smile a handful of times. You get the hallway illusion gag, which is just so brilliant and fun to watch. They find a way to make the centerpiece stunt, the scaling of the Burj Khalifa, a little silly somehow. They get Jeremy Renner to be a little funny. I mean, that's impressive. Not to mention, both in the poster and in the movie, Cruise rocks this little hood up look, and I don't know if anyone has ever looked goofier. I like it. I think it's cool, but I also think Tom Cruise with his hood up is just so silly in the best way. They top it all off with him disappearing into the fog. I mean, come on. On that note, this more than any of the others treats Hunt almost like a superhero. Not like a strange, godlike figure the way he's treated in Final Reckoning, but like he's this otherworldly hero who, cursed by this gift of his, can't live a normal life. Which gets to the root of what I love about him as a character, specifically in this one. It's made painfully clear in every Mission Impossible movie that Hunt is insane, but this is really the only one that feels rather upfront about how he feels about this, what it feels like to be alone in his position. It both makes Hunt a stronger character because of this, and makes the chemistry within the IMF team a hell of a lot stronger. Now that Benji is properly in it, this is the first film where it feels like they have a solid team, which is essential to making these things work. Like I mentioned at the top of this video, these films have been consistently entertaining since the beginning, and part of that consistency is keeping to a formula, making sure the action is exciting and the plot is serviceable. I've found through that it's hard to make a truly awful Mission Impossible film, but it's equally as hard to make one that really stands out from the rest, and I think Ghost Protocol stands out in a good way. It's fun, it's colorful, it understands what makes Hunt special, but treats him like a human being at the same time. It markets itself off of the incredible centerpiece stunt, the Burj Khalifa one, and then finds a way to elevate the intensity of that stunt in a way completely out of Hunt's control. I mean, that's brilliant to me. It challenges Hunt in a number of ways, and through that you actually feel like you learn something new about him in the process. It didn't have to do that. The action here is great, the plot is a blast, but it's better because of it. It went the extra mile. All of that said, I love this one. I really do. This, though, this is quite literally what it's all about. For about a month while working on this video, I was really expecting to put Ghost Protocol at the top, but upon rewatching this one, Fallout is a pretty important movie for this franchise. I think we can all agree on that. For a lot of people, this is the best one, and I'd argue it's what got people to take a step back and appreciate the entire series in a new light. It's the kind of movie that gets you to love the other movies more. It spreads. That's crazy. I can't think of a filmmaker or franchise or anything that has a movie that pulls that off. The story goes, Ethan Hunt and his team join forces with a CIA assassin to prevent a big ol' plan to attack multiple major cities with nuclear weapons. I'm not sure you can apply the no skips term to a film, as you can't really skip scenes, but let's pretend you can for a second, because Fallout is a no skips movie. It's a movie where every single scene kinda hits, and this was made especially clear on a rewatch. Believe it or not, when I first saw this, I wasn't in love with it. I liked it a lot, but I think I was a bit caught off guard, maybe because it was so overhyped at the time, but on a rewatch, I'm shocked at how much it hit. Maybe just because of the marathon I went on watching all these movies before I revisited this, but I found it to be both a love letter to the franchise and these characters, and the quintessential Mission Impossible film, the one that gets it all right and soars above what you might expect from these movies. Because while yes, we can agree on the obvious, the skydiving scene is iconic, the final 20 minutes leave you sweating, the bathroom scene, which is immediately after the skydiving scene by the way, is probably the best fight choreography of the entire series. We know it looks amazing and it sounds amazing, and the edit makes these 2 hours and 20 minutes feel like 90. These are the things we've come to expect from the franchise, at least these days, and this does happen to be the best example of all of it. But on top of that, I find it particularly impressive how much the film actually achieves within a single runtime. I mean, this kind of checks off everything I mentioned today. It taps into Hunt's own personal conflicts, his complicated history with relationships and work. It builds on what the series has been working towards. You get a sense of confidence here, something that none of the others had up until now. It doesn't hurt that it's also the first Mission Impossible film at the time where a director actually actually returned for another film instead of them finding someone else. It's definitely not as comedic as Ghost Protocol, yet it still doesn't take itself too seriously. The opening before the title drops is one of the silliest things I've ever seen them do. It hit particularly hard after seeing the new Naked Gun, funny enough. And for once, the movie doesn't ever feel like it's playing catch up with the plot. These have never been necessarily confusing movies, though they've come pretty close, but oftentimes because of all the moving pieces, they fall victim to feeling overly mechanical in their storytelling, a bit rigid with their storytelling, and not leaving a ton of room to breathe. Fallout has both the cleanest narrative and honestly the deepest one. You never feel lost in this movie, and it deals out twists and turns pretty consistently without ever feeling like it's spinning its wheels in the mud, all while also tapping into Hunt's inner psyche somewhere along the way. I also have to mention that Henry Cavill is amazing in this movie and adds a lot to it. He throws off Ethan's confidence and sense of place in a really compelling way, something you don't see enough of in these films. If you can't tell, there's a little bit of everything here. It manages to capture everything I love and expect out of films like this, whilst surprising me in the process. It's kind of a lightning in a bottle situation. It's amazing to me that it even exists. For that reason, yeah, this is really the only answer for number one, isn't it? And you know what? I think that's gonna do. Like Blade once said, Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise. I couldn't agree more. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, go watch these films and form your own opinions, and I hope to see you in the next one.